our next artist and our last artist for today. We're going to see two of his works. This is Francesco Borromini. Now, he is an architect, and I like to introduce him right after Bernini's St. Teresa because what we looked at was sculpture, and then the Ecstasy of St. Teresa is a larger kind of experience of sculpture and space architecture. And now we're going to look at an architect. Now, Francesco Borromini, beautiful, extremely talented artist. What he does with architecture is what Bernini did in sculpture. He, Borromini, makes architecture behave like sculpture. He makes it seem like it's moving, but also like rather than holding up a structure, the decorative elements of the structure just are. It just is. Miss Cortez, you don't make any sense. I know. He can make a building look as if it's breathing. You're going to think I'm exaggerating. Okay, let's go to our first work of art by Borromini. Here we are. This is Borromini's facade or face, front, exterior, the facade of San Carlo alla Quattro Fontane. Now, Borromini was hired to build this church on a very small plot of land, and he had some just restrictions that he couldn't change, like the fact that it is on an intersection that had four previously installed fountains. In fact, that's why it gets its name. San Carlo, Saint Carlos, or Saint Charles, who it's dedicated to, at the Quattro Fontane, alla Quattro Fontane. So the church is San Carlo, and it's designated by its location at the intersection of the four fountains. Now, it's a very narrow plot of land he was given to work with, and it's at the top of a steep hill. The hill goes back this way. So, not a lot of space. A difficult situation, but it is in Rome, and Borromini is going to and is willing to take this challenge on because, well, I'm just going to spill some tea, got to gossip here. Borromini is difficult to work with. While Bernini was super charming and everybody loved him and he was such a hit with everybody, right? Borromini, he's difficult. He's so stubborn. He can see the world as a series of mathematical equations, and he doesn't understand or have the patience for anybody who doesn't get his vision. And so he's often hired for these really, high-profile building commissions, but then he's fired in the middle of them because he's too difficult to work with. Borromini is hired to do San Carlo alla Quattro Fontane for a sect of the Catholic faith called the Trinitarians. Whoa, Miss Cortez, way too much information. Okay, I'll introduce you to them again. But what he's really done here is he's given us three facades, three faces. There is this face that's the fountain, one face that is on this road, and a second face, or third face, I should say, on the other. And it's a very narrow space. As the narrow, a narrow intersection as well. Let's just jump on the other side of this intersection and look at this main facade. This is the main doors, so let's go there. Ooh. Now you might think that the movement or curve or odd angle of this is because it's done with a lens, a camera lens that's changing it. No, this is the real church. When you stand on the other side, this is what it really looks like. It has this bend. I told you that he makes architecture behave like sculpture. It looks as if it's undulating. It's rising up and coming off of the ground. It's pulsing. Let's think about our characteristics of the Baroque. Okay, no diagonal lines, sure. Baroque moment, okay, it's not a narrative. There's no story, so we can't say that. But do you see ovals? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you see rectangles? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's think again about the dynamic of that oval. You can make an oval by pushing or pulling. What is it? It's both. It seems to be compressing and stretching at the same time. So Baroque, right? And how does he do it visually? I'm going to show you in this floor plan, but first let's make a stronger comparison against the Renaissance. So we didn't talk about this in our week one establishment of the Renaissance, but I think it's important for you to see how different the architecture is between the Baroque and the Renaissance. This is by a proclaimed master of the Renaissance architect. His name is Alberti, and this is another church, Santa Maria Novella. Now, it's located in Florence, but it is often used as the example for all Renaissance or Italian Renaissance churches. So let's make a comparison. Here's an Italian church. Here's an Italian church. Renaissance, Baroque. What Alberti was doing in his church was giving you perfect circles and perfect squares. Do you see them? He had been commissioned to complete the front of this church. The church had already been built long ago, but the face of the church had been unfinished. Now, Alberti, he went to university and he wrote a few books about architecture. And in reference to the classical world, as a Renaissance artist would do, his ideas of architecture were heavily based on Vitruvius. Remember him? Remember? Palladio? Palladio also used Vitruvius. Remember, Vitruvius said, oh, perfect circles and perfect squares make up the world, therefore man should inhabit perfect circles and perfect squares. Alberti's reading the same Vitruvius, and he writes his own books about architecture, and he applies it to Santa Maria Novella. You see it? He creates a facade that is perfect in its proportions to a square, which can fit a perfect circle. And if you were to look at all of the little squares and all of the perfect circles, it's so stable, it's so balanced, it's so logical, it's so harmonic in its proportions. You can in fact take a full square and divide it in half, and it would line up with elements within the church or within the facade. If you were to take one of these squares, 1/4 of the larger square, it can be applied to the face of the church in the shape of this. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating, these are just some sketches by others of the proportions of Alberti's church. Isn't this fantastic? Look at all these perfect circles and perfect squares. Anywhere you cut this, it creates perfect circles and perfect squares. Interesting to note, what Alberti's doing with this 1/4 square proportion is he's highlighting a temple front. Remember that? We talked about with Palladio. Why? Because it's a Renaissance. They are all doing this. These are the rules, the principles of good architecture. So Alberti's doing the same thing as Palladio. Palladio's doing the same thing as Alberti. So we have a ancient Greek temple front placed at the top of Alberti's Santa Maria. Similar to our argument about Cardinal Borghese and that he's not worshiping Apollo and Daphne, Alberti had to make the argument, I'm putting a temple front on our church, not because I'm saying we worship ancient Greek gods and goddesses, but that was their house of God, just like the church is our house of God. So here we see this beautiful play of the classical world into the Renaissance. What does this have to do with Borromini? How different. How remarkably different. Gone are the perfect circles and perfect squares. Instead, what we see are characteristics of the Baroque. Ovals, rectangles, creating tension, creating drama, creating instability. Gesture doesn't count. There's no figures that we're going to focus on. Now, I said I want to show you how he creates this undulating line, like it's expanding and contracting and moving forward and moving backwards. Let's look at the floor plan. Here's the floor plan. I promise, we'll go inside. But when you look at the floor plan, right away, do you see ovals? Yeah. It's not a very big space. It just has enough room for one main church center, and then you see some spiral staircases that lead off to a few of the more administrative areas, but it's not a big church. It's a very limited space they had in Rome. But let's look at that sidewalk there. That's this sidewalk that you're walking on. Okay. So you're walking, oh, there's the church, you see it, oh, look this way, yeah, cool. And then, boom, you're walking and then you trip on the step. It's as if the building has come in front of you and stopped you. It's literally in your way. It moved. As you moved, it seemed as if it was moving. And then let's think about this in terms of the Counter-Reformation. The Catholic Church, this is a Catholic church, is trying to pull back those who have gone astray with the Protestant faith. So here as you're walking, it's as if the church is going, come on in, come back, come into the church quite literally, come into the Catholic faith symbolically. It's pretty crazy, right? That undulating surface is caused by the concave and convex of the actual building. So he's pulling forward and pushing back the structure. He's making it behave like sculpture rather than being concerned with, or at least seeming to be concerned with, the stability of this space. Now, this oval shape, it also has a connection with the people who paid for it, which is a great bonus. The Trinitarian are the sect of the faith, or the Catholic faith, that paid for this church. They are referred to as a Trinitarian because of their emphasis on the Trinity. Tri means three, and it is an emphasis on the three: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Trinitarian is also defined by a triangle, a three-sided or three-angled shape. So, do you see any triangles here? No? How about if you double a triangle and then you connect it? It makes an oval. I told you, I said, Bernini sees the world like mathematical and geometric equations, and he gets frustrated because we don't see it. So this oval is in proportion to the Trinitarian triangle. He's a genius. Let's walk in. It's not a very big space. I told you, right? Now we see these columns here. These are the columns right here. And you can see how they're attached to the walls, right? But when we're in the room, a really curious thing happens. Look at that. There's space. They're not fully attached to the walls. Uh-oh, what? It's not a mistake. It's not a bad thing. What Borromini did is he had the columns attached at the base, but as the column narrows towards the top, it removes itself from the wall, and that space, that gap for our eye, creates this fluctuation, right? Let me get out of the way again. The fluctuation makes it appear as if it's breathing, as if this is a lung, and we're seeing the walls compress and expand. Those columns are like our rib cage, maybe. I mean, anatomically, that's not correct. But are these holding back the walls from collapsing in on us, or are they receding and pulling away as the walls expand away from us? There's this fluctuation, this instability of a building, which should be completely stable. It's dramatic. It expands our space in this. Now let's look up. Stand in the middle and let's look up. Ooh. I could talk more about the proportions of shape and space that you're seeing in here. Instead, I'm going to attach a video below that you can watch at your own leisure. But let's look at this dome. You can see how the sides of the walls echo the shape of the room. And then there's this fantastic oval of a dome, and it's filled with this blinding light, this bright white light coming from inside. But from where? If we were to zoom in on it, we see light coming in, but we don't see windows. This is something the Baroque artists love to do. We saw that with Bernini. He did that with St. Teresa. I'm going to give you the light, but I'm going to hide the origin. It creates more drama, more spectacle. Here, Borromini's doing the same thing. You can see here in this diagram, the dome is lit, and it seems brighter because it's lit by these hidden windows. There's windows on either side, but this heavy what would you call it, like frame or shelf, it stops us from seeing the window, and instead we just see the shelf and then we see the dome. Additionally, when we look at this dome, it looks like it's super tall, like it's going on and on and on, way high, like it's this extreme angle, because these shapes around it seem to recede and get smaller. That's an optical illusion. It's really not that tall of a dome. Instead, Borromini establishes a shape and then quickly makes it or shrinks it, making it smaller, so that our eye sees, oh, this must be the same size as it goes backwards, but really it doesn't. It's getting smaller. So all of these optical illusions here. If we go in a little bit closer, the dome has a triangle. It's the Trinitarian all over again. It's fantastic. All right, I'm going to put a video that I like. You can watch it, it's not required, but it does have a lot of visual references that we talked about and some more details. If we were in class together and if we had time, this would be one of those videos I'd pop in and we'd watch together. All right, I'll see you with our last work of art today.